Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to Top 10 Middle Game Ideas number 3, the Pillsbury attack. I wanted to kick off this discussion of the Pillsbury attack with some information about Harry Nelson Pillsbury, the author of the attack. Pillsbury was an American player, and it was sort of like Paul Morphy. He really astonished the chess world with his brief but brilliant career. Pillsbury, though, was not a child prodigy like Morphy. He actually learned the game fairly late at the age of 16. But he was really improved quickly. He learned the game and got stronger very rapidly. And after some good results in the U.S., he was sponsored to go to play in a tournament in Europe, the Hastings tournament of 1895. And this was a really strong tournament, and maybe the strongest in the 19th century. The players there included the current world champion, Emanuel Lasker, the former world champion, Wilhelm Steinitz. There was also Mikhail Chigorin, Siegbert Tarrasch, Joseph Henry Blackburn, Amos Byrne, and others. Just all the top players of the late 19th century, it seems, were there. And he astonished everyone, perhaps even himself, by finishing in clear first place at that tournament. And he spent the next 9 years playing in top tournaments over in Europe. And well, his last tournament was Cambridge Springs in the U.S. in 1904. So a brief career. And he was somewhat disappointed, also like Morphy. Morphy went over to Europe to play against Staunton and was never able to arrange a match. What Pillsbury wanted was to arrange a match for the World Championship with Lasker, and he was never able to arrange that. In those days, there was no formal system. You just had to, collect backers, raise money, and challenge the champion to a match. And if the champion liked your terms, then he might agree to the match if there was enough money, and etc. So he was never able to do that. And by 1904, he was already pretty sick, and he died a few years later. So just a brief career, but he was really a great attacking player, and his games are well worth studying. You know, I will show a few games here in this series, concentrating on the Pillsbury attack, but just any of his games, you can find some great attacking ideas, just picking one at random. This particular game I'm going to show you was played in Paris in 1900, and his opponent is Georg Marko. This game was actually written up in a book by Irving Chernev called Logical Chess Step by Step. He used this as an example. So this is a very well-known game. And, well, let's get to it. It's deservedly well-known. Pillsbury kicked off with d4. Marko played d5. c4, e6. So we get a queen's gambit declined. We get the normal placement of the knights. And now Pillsbury plays bishop g5. This move, bishop g5, was sort of put on the map by Pillsbury. He was playing this already in the tournament in 1895 at Hastings. And at the time, it was considered a bit of a dubious move. The bishop has left the queen side, which has already been weakened a bit by the move c4 here. So there's some holes over here on the queen side, and it was thought that black got a good play by counterattacking on the queen side, or going for counterplay on the queen side. So, but Pillsbury thought differently, and he was able to prove his point, I guess, because this is now considered a respectable line. This is like the second choice in this position in the database. Okay, so bishop e7 is a normal response. e3, black castles, knight to f3, and now b6. This is the first move that is not played so often anymore. People still play this way. I mean, b6 is a logical setup here, where black is trying to solve the problem of the queen's bishop here, which is locked in behind this pawn chain, by putting it on a good square here. So it makes sense. Today, the way they would play it is h6, typically. Kick the bishop back, and then play b6. So a little bit of preparation before going directly with b6. And perhaps it's games like this. It was perhaps due to Pillsbury's influence that the black players started playing more cautiously. But at the time, as I said, the feeling was that white was weaker over here on the queen side, and black should just go just go for the expansion on the queen side, start exploiting those advantages immediately. So b6 right away. Pillsbury played bishop d3. Also, I shouldn't give the impression this is a losing move. This is still a playable position for black. Bishop b7. And now Pillsbury exchanges here on d5. And black takes back with the pawn. This is not the only move here, but it's a logical move. If you take with pieces, you end up with a piece here on d5 that maybe can be kicked back with a subsequent e4. Whereas a pawn on here also helps restrain white's expansion in the center. So this e-pawn is not going forward. This d-pawn here with the bishop behind it is acting to restrain any kind of central expansion from white. But, well, expanding in the center is not Pillsbury's plan. He has a different idea. So knight to e5, knight b to d7, challenging the knight on e5 and also staying out of the way of the bishop. And now f4. So this is the Pillsbury attack. It's this setup right here. And white has these three pawns, which look very solid. Black is going to try and undermine those, but the idea, if we want to just think about this at the moment, is white is setting up for a kingside attack. Look, his bishop is already over here. This bishop is pointing directly at the king side. This knight is already involved. The rook and the queen can get into the game pretty quickly too. Black can castle and the rook can come out perhaps through f3. The queen can come out via a couple of routes. In this game it goes queen f3 to h3. But it could also, after castling, the queen can also come to e1 and out to h4. So black is, white is leaving the center fixed. So he's not going to move those pawns at all, except maybe the f-pawn. We'll come back to that one. He's just going to try and hold his ground in the center and just throw his pieces over to the king side and just break through that way. And he looks pretty well positioned to do that. And the idea from black's point of view is just counterattacking on the queen side. And one more point I wanted to bring up about this position before I move on. So we talked about the solid center and the piece configuration, but there's also this little exchange that Pillsbury threw in. He took the d-pawn and black took back with the e-pawn. So this pawn is missing, which means that the f-pawn can come forward without being restrained by the e-pawn. So that's one last little wrinkle, and we'll see that it's relevant to this game. Anyway, so black gets going on the queen side immediately with c5, and white castles, Pillsbury castles. And now Marco plays c4. And I think at the time this was considered the correct way to respond, with the benefit of hindsight and also some experience that people have gained over the years playing these positions. It seems like c4 is the wrong idea. c4 just gives white a little bit too much of what he wants, and we'll see the result in this game. You know, it is gaining a tempo on the bishop, but it's leaving the fixed center so that it's no longer so easy, or maybe not even possible at all, for black to undermine that center. And so black is committed to a queenside attack, and white is committed to a kingside attack. And it just turns out the kingside attack is faster. And this is the kind of thing you can't really, nobody can compute ahead far enough to figure that out. This is the kind of thing that people learn via experience. And Pillsbury is one of the people that proved this, and this game is a good example of it. If we back up one move, I think black still has a playable game here with something like this. He could take, so soften up the center a little bit, and then h6 again, kick that bishop, and then knight to e4, and try and trade off some pieces. That exposes this attack on the bishop, and the knight can also trade off for this knight on c3 potentially. So that's considered the best way to play this. I looked at it with a chess engine, and that's what the engine recommended. But on the other hand, Black, to play that way, has also given up any ideas of counterplay on the queen side. He no longer has this queen side majority, and White still has a lot of pieces over here on the king side. So Black, it's not like Black is going to have an easy game at this point, I guess is what I wanted to say. He's still going to have some kind of defensive task to deal with. But c4 is just the wrong idea in these positions. And so let's see why. So c4 kicks the bishop back. Bishop drops back to c2. Notice it wants to stay on this diagonal looking at the king side. Now a6, just continuing with this plan of queenside expansion. It's preparing to play b5, queen to f3, and b5, and now queen to h3. And now the maneuvering stage is over, and now we're into direct threats. So the threat here, obviously the queen and the bishop are coordinating on the h7 square. But, well, it's protected by this knight at the moment. But there is a way to get rid of it. You have to also get rid of this backup knight. So the way to play this is knight takes d7, or the threat here is knight takes d7, bishop takes f6, and then queen here, mate. So this has to be dealt with. This is an immediate threat. And also it shows the importance of the bishop outside the pawn chain, the knight up here on e5. These active pieces as well as the other pieces, are all playing a role here in making this attack work. Marco plays g6 here. He deals with the threat, and maybe is not worried. But I can say that this game is already lost at this point, surprisingly enough. And g6 was the best move. So it's just that, as I said before, this expansion on the queen side is just a little bit too slow. Anyway, after g6, Pillsbury pushes ahead with f4. So again, we see this idea with the f-pawn. And the fact that that e-pawn is missing means that, you can't just take that pawn. So that pawn has come forward. And Black goes for counterplay on the queen side, b4. So let's see. Is this the point? Yeah, here's a point where you might want to pause and think, what would you do? You've got the white pieces. Your knight is under attack. But you have a dangerous-looking threats over here on the king side. So what would you play in this position? This is a good position to just kind of pause and think about, see what kind of attacking ideas you can discover in this position. Okay, so I was just to give you some time to pause the video. I'm going to start talking again. Here, f takes g6 is what Pillsbury played. He ignored the threat to the knight. So can Black take that knight? That's another question for you to consider. And yeah, pause the video until you figure that out. Is it safe to take that knight or not? The knight on c3. Can Black take that knight? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. You cannot take that knight. That is not playable. If you take the knight, then the idea here is that what you've done with that exchange is you've opened up the f-file and you start to exploit that. Rook takes f6. You grab that rook, and you've also gotten rid of the knight, so there's checkmate threatened. So knight takes f6, the knight comes back, bishop takes f6, and now if you take the bishop, then it's mate. If you don't take the bishop, then you're down material and losing in other ways. But the upshot is that you cannot take that knight. It's clearly unplayable. So Marco spots that. He takes back with the h-pawn. Now he's probably feeling the pressure here. But here's a really killer move. I'm not going to ask you to guess this one because I don't know if anyone could figure this out. It's not a move that I would guess. But it's kind of one of those silent moves. Pillsbury plays the move. Queen to h4. Again, leaving his knight hanging. And Marco at this point finds nothing better than to take that knight. So he goes ahead and grabs the knight. I'll go ahead and put that on. So what was the idea with queen to h4? What new ideas were introduced into the position by that move? You might want to pause here and think about that queen h4 move and what is it doing, and how would you proceed in this position? Okay, I'm going to go ahead with what was played here. Pillsbury just starts removing the defenders here. He's got a killer attack and he just needs to cash in. And we've seen some of these ideas before. He starts by removing the backup knight. If he takes this knight first, then the other knight comes forward and it's not so easy to get rid of. So he gets rid of this knight on d7 first. Queen takes. And now he gets rid of the knight on f6. And it's very important that he takes with the rook and not with the bishop, because he wants to end up with a bishop on f6, and that's the key idea. After rook takes f6, Marco has to struggle to find a defense here. If he takes, he didn't take, but if he takes, then bishop takes f6, and the mate is unstoppable. So that's just the coordination on h8, and the king can't escape. And the bishop on f6 is holding this pawn back, so he can't even bring pieces over to defend. Often the case. So, but Marco's not giving up at this point. He looks for a defense, and he finds the interesting move a5. So, well, we'll see the idea of that move in just a second. So Pillsbury doubles rooks, and Marco lifts his rook. So that was the point of a5. He's going to try and defend along the third rank here. And so once one more time, I guess the last time in this video, I'll ask you to look for the next attacking move from Pillsbury here. What would you play? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. Pillsbury sacrifices another piece. He's actually not down a piece at the moment because, well, he gave up this knight on c3, but he actually gained a knight over here on f6. So he's got the same number of pieces, so he can afford to sacrifice a piece, I guess. Also, this is a extremely forcing sacrifice because, once again, there's a mate threat on h7. So that bishop has to be taken. And now he just starts removing defenders. First he takes off the rook here. Bishop takes. And he takes off the bishop. King takes. And okay, yeah, it goes on for a few more moves before black resigns. But this is a good point. I guess I lied when I said I wasn't going to ask you to think anymore. But this is a good point to see if you can figure out how you would finish the game after you eliminate those defenders. You're a rook down at this point, but the king is totally exposed. And notice that black's pieces, well, you know, he's lifted them up so that they're looking out here. The only piece that never really got into the game is this bishop on b7. But you know, Marco was doing his best to get his pieces into the game. But in fact, it's white's turn to move here, and there's just a killer blow here. So I will play out the rest of the game here. It's queen to h8 check. King only has one legal move, and then it is queen to h7 check. And this is really pretty here. The king has a couple different squares it could go to. Let's see, what are all the squares it could go to? It could go to here, here, or here. Those are all the legal moves. If it goes here, then queen takes is checkmate. The bishop is guarding the escape this way, and the pawn is guarding the escape that way. So that center pawn, which was there to just hold up the center and prevent counterplay, is actually playing a role in this mate. And if the king goes back this way, then queen here is mate. So in the game, king to f8 is played, but that just gives up the queen, and he resigned at this point because actually this is a mate in two. There's no way to stop the idea of bishop check and queen mate. So very pretty game. Yeah. I guess I was looking at what about C takes B2. You could make some threats here of your own. Black is just one step away from queening with check, but well, all these moves are with check as well. Check and mate. So that's the end of the game, and well, that's it for this video. I'm going to have another video on the Pillsbury attack where I will just show some more examples. I won't go over whole games in those cases. I'll just show some typical tactical patterns. That's coming up in the next video, and I will see you then.